For amplified relief, replace your next bottle of CBD with CBK1. CBK1 is a patented anti-inflammatory formulation designed to be faster acting, stronger, and longer lasting than traditional CBD. Perfect for anyone dealing with chronic and acute pain to athletes looking to gain a competitive edge. Shop capsules and topicals at cbk1.com. Free shipping to all 50 U.S. states, third-party lab tested for safety, and 100% THC free, derived from U.S. grown hemp. cbk1.com. Are you a cannabis company looking for an unrestricted, uncensored way to advertise your brand? With PodConnects, you can promote your brand on over 40 independent cannabis podcasts for as little as $1,000 per campaign. Just send your budget, provide your script, and PodConnects will produce your commercials and have it playing in less than 3 days. Go to podconnects.com/advertise.com to get started today.
Well, it's Friday, and there's never a dull Friday in the existence of the cannabis universe and in Pro Cannabis Media. Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy Young, the host of Green Rush Live and also the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. And we have a very interesting breaking news situation going on here in the cannabis business world. And every third Friday, we happen to have Morgan Fox from NORML joining us, and we have him again today. But I'm also going to be joined by my almost regular co-host, guest host, Josh Kincaid. Josh, how you doing today?
Good, Jimmy. Thanks for having me on again.
No. Happy you're here. And Morgan, I'm guessing you know what we're going to talk about. Do you know what we're going to talk about, Morgan?
I'm actually not exactly sure if it's breaking because I've been on the road since 7 a.m.
Okay, but you knew about the main case and the case of them challenging resident in Maine. And anyway, the federal court ruled on this. Now, did you know that?
I did.
Okay.
I'm still diving into exactly what that means nationally, as well as what that means for the jurisdiction of that particular circuit. But it's definitely very interesting to see the Dormant Commerce Clause being applied in such a fashion. Yep.
And that's exactly right. And you know, it's funny. It was a few months ago. We had the law professor from Vanderbilt on, I think it's Robert Mikos, and he explained how that works and why he thinks it is in place and why, and this pretty much clears the way for interstate commerce in cannabis. And I mean, rather than reading the entire article from Marijuana Moment and Tom Angel, and we all know him, it was basically a 2-1 decision by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit that affirmed that interpretation, which is broadly meant to prevent states from enforcing laws that unduly restrict interstate commerce unless given specific instruction from Congress. Maine's residency requirement for medical marijuana licensing is an example of an excessive regulation to that end, the panel's majority found. So again, you know, it goes back to, in fact, when I was reading about this, and David Rabinovitz, he's kind of our resident historian. The Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment is playing a role in this too, I guess, as you look at this, because that has been renewed every year since 2014. And Congress has acknowledged that this market may continue to exist in some circumstances free from federal criminal enforcement. And the reaction from the cannabis industry community that I've been reading, these comments online, feel like this is a great kind of a shot across the bow again to Congress to understand that something has to be happen. There has to be some kind of reform. And I'm going to guess it's going to help you out in the trenches, right?
Well, absolutely. But let's look at this historically a little bit. So you go back to 2005 with the Supreme Court case of Gonzalez v. Raich, where the federal government basically said that they can continue to prosecute people even if they're in compliance with state law, because even somebody having a small amount of plants in their house, or having a small collective of plants with other patients, is technically a way to, or will influence interstate commerce. And this goes all the way back to like an old case called Wickard v. Filburn. So that was like kind of the start of this. And then now we have so many people that are trying to get something done with interstate commerce here. And this ruling, I think, is very interesting, but I think it's going to take a lot of legal heads to kind of parse out what exactly it means. And it's also only precedent for that particular circuit. And if you look at the issues of what Maine was trying to do, which was trying to keep basically the industry completely in-state and homegrown, that is a laudable goal. But at the same time, that also prevents any sort of out-of-state investment in any of the companies that might be trying to get a leg up, particularly small businesses that don't necessarily have access to either in-state or traditional lending.
Yeah.
So it's a very complicated issue.
Of course it is. And I don't understand most of it other than what I read. And I'm a good reader. So I'm going to read this again about the appellate court ruling is limited in scope, that it currently is only directly affecting states within its jurisdiction, which covers Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Puerto Rico, and Rhode Island. How did Puerto Rico get in New England? That's what I'd like to know on that. Does anybody have any idea? Josh, everybody, we're shaking our heads. How did that?
I honestly don't know.
I mean, just because Alex Cora is the manager of the Red Sox, I mean, I don't get it. I mean, is that the only thing? I'm only kidding. So you're right about this, but Josh, I'm sure you have a question for Morgan regarding this. I'm just going to see if I can find any other key moments in this this article and share.
Well, just to get everybody up to speed, Dormant Commerce Clause is referring to the prohibition of the illicit in the Commerce Clause. So that's against states passing legislation that discriminates against the excessively burdensome interstate commerce. So you have Oregon that passed a law a few years ago that said they can buy and sell cannabis all day long once it becomes federally legal. But to get people up to speed, how can states supersede federal law? So if the whole West Coast, Alaska, Vancouver, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, California, they're all legal. Why can't we trade in between? It's because federal law says we can't. So the Dormant Commerce Clause, I don't understand how that could even be something that's looked at, because of the feds. You can't have state law supersede federal laws. Am I right on that, Morgan? Or does this have some other bearing that I'm unaware of?
Well, you're absolutely right. But at the same time, every single state law regarding cannabis, whether it be adult use or recreational or medical, is in violation of federal law. So technically, states could enter into interstate compacts, but they would be in violation of federal law. I feel like most state legislatures, as well as most state regulators for cannabis systems, feel like that might just be a step too far and would bring the hammer down on them. But they could do it and see what happens. Just like every single state that has passed sensible cannabis policy reform has done so far. But the Dormant Commerce Clause really kicks in as soon as federal law changes, which means that you can be able to trade in this substance and transport it across state boundaries regardless. So, if say Nebraska continues to be an illegal state, once cannabis is legal federally, you can't, Nebraska would not be able to stop people from shipping cannabis through its territorial borders, and the federal government would not be able to stop states from entering into either interstate compacts or just doing business across borders. So it does create a lot of considerations that both state and federal lawmakers need to think about when they're approaching this. I haven't read this opinion thoroughly yet, but I would think that it doesn't really necessarily say that all of a sudden interstate commerce is legal. And anybody that is saying such, I think you need to really take it with a grain of salt and consult a ton of lawyers
Right. It's good.
before you start shipping across state lines. Because while it might not be an enforcement priority, you will still be like doing that one thing that the feds are still like really kind of iffy about. Even if they're letting states do their own thing, but as soon as you get into interstate commerce, they're going to want to have a much stronger position and a much stronger structure on it. And if people start doing it willy-nilly, I fear that it could create serious crackdowns.
Idaho doesn't even want you to transport hemp. There's a
Right.
lot of issues just trying to get legal products.
You're absolutely right. I mean, there's still people sitting in jail right now in places like South Dakota for moving federally legal hemp products.
Yeah. Again, there's a lot of issues that are out there, and but I want to continue with this because it says if Maine's residency requirement violates the Dormant Commerce Clause as an unconstitutionally protectionist policy, the same could theoretically be argued about state laws that prioritize licensing people who have been disproportionately harmed by the drug war. So there already is some pushback from the social equity community because we've got Robert Mikos. He's basically saying court decisions like this one could put an end to a lot of social equity licensing programs because those social equity licensing programs have had to rely on the same sort of residency discrimination to work. And that's Robert Mikos' quote from Vanderbilt. And then Shalene Title, who's a very outspoken cannabis advocate and a former commissioner for the original Cannabis Commission in Massachusetts. Now,
Shalene's my dude. She's awesome.
Everybody loves Shalene. I agree. She's now the founder of the Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition, the CRCC. Here's her quote. The takeaway from an equity perspective is that regulators and people concerned about fair markets should understand the case and be prepared for dominoes to start falling, she said. Being informed and prepared is still the best way to counteract legal confusion and chaos that bigger companies benefit from. You know, Morgan, again, there's definitely a little battle inside the cannabis industry between the multi-state operators and those craft cultivators, the smaller ones. What kind of effect is that going to have on putting pressure to get anything passed in front of our Senate in the next, I don't even know, make it a decade at this point, because it doesn't look like anything's going to happen anytime soon.
I'm not even going to hazard a guess. But what I will say is that, one possible iteration of this ruling is that small businesses might be able to get additional funding from out of state in places where they were not allowed to do so. I mean, we all know, and like groups like MCBA and others have all been just like harping on this, that while we're getting very limited benefits and like emphasis on very limited from state level social equity programs, the best way to deal with these problems is to remove license caps. So I'm not sure if this particular ruling would necessarily have an impact on that. But all that being said, I think that we're really going to have to like dive into this, because I think that it could have a lot of unforeseen consequences, both good and bad. I think that it kind of caught everybody a little bit off guard, and nobody is really sure exactly what this is going to mean. What I know for sure is that it's going to continue to be tied up in the courts, and this ruling is going to engender a whole lot more lawsuits for any sort of state protectionist structures. And unfortunately, most of the social equity programs that exist right now are based on limited license programs, which by their very nature are a little bit protectionist and might be thrown into a tumult because of this ruling. Right. But again, only within the jurisdiction of that particular circuit.
So Andrew Klein, I think you probably recognize, I don't know if you recognize that name. I do, senior counsel at Perkins Coie.
I respect Andrew quite a bit. I used to work with him at NCIA.
So he says there may be other non-protectionist reasons that states choose to ban such commerce under the status quo of federal prohibition. His quote, It could be protectionist. It could also be that those state rules are in place because everyone, including state legislatures, and state regulators, have been under the impression that the Controlled Substances Act prohibits interstate commerce. Therefore, they're trying to sort of walk a fine line between abiding by some portion of the federal law while allowing for state sales. Does that make sense to you? His quote about the.
I mean, it's pretty pretty complicated, and I think that that's a definite good point. But when you come back to it, every single cannabis system violates the Controlled Substances Act. So it really comes down to a question of how far are people going to push it.
Yeah, and it says Klein said this decision should send a clear message to Congress that without action on federal cannabis reform that thoughtfully accounts for the complications of interstate commerce between divergent state markets, the industry will continue to find itself grappling with issues like this dormant commerce clause case. And this is his quote again. This is Andrew. In some ways, this ruling is a shot across the bow for the industry. And in some ways,
it's a shot across the bow for Congress, more importantly, because I think that Andrew is absolutely right.
Right.
A system of laws where large and multi-million-dollar economic systems are technically illegal, but are being tolerated, and the piecemeal system that we have is not sustainable. And I think that this ruling kind of really it highlights the fact that federal law is standing in the way. Now we have all sorts of systems where state laws differ about things. I mean, alcohol still is one of those things where there are differences between state to state, and there are also rules regarding interstate commerce when it comes to alcohol. Like some states will not, or some states have more stringent rules when you want to import beer, liquor than other states. They have more strict labeling rules. You have to go through more hoops and whatnot, and that is clearly going to continue in the cannabis system. But the fact that we have such a huge dichotomy between state and federal law, and states are continuing to move in the right direction on this, more and more states every year, and we're looking at potentially like 4 or 5 that could turn in November. I think that this court ruling is really a clear signal for Congress to get off their asses.
That's right, 100%. He says, this is Andrew again. It's a shot in the arm for the industry because the First Circuit recognized that a robust interstate market already exists that is likely to attract entrants far and wide and is supported by congressional action through the Rohrabacher-Farr law clause or whatever. And one other little note here. New Jersey State Senate President Nicholas Kottari filed a bill this month that would authorize the governor to enter into agreements with other legal states to import and export cannabis. So this is just beginning. And you know what? Clarence Thomas is sitting there going, see, I told you these laws were screwed up, right? And he's right. I mean, and it's another reason why, and Josh, you probably heard me say this. Morgan, I know you said this. You want to invest in the cannabis industry, invest in a cannabis industry law firm, okay? Because they are going to make money no matter what the law says, right?
Well, I mean, a great person to speak with about interstate commerce issues is Adam Smith. I believe he's still with the Craft Cannabis Alliance up in Oregon, and he's been working on getting states to pass interstate commerce compacts that would be triggered as soon as they were allowed by federal law. And I think that at some point, some states might just say like, we're just going to go ahead anyway, regardless of federal law. But we'll see. At the end of the day, though, I think that it's really great to see that courts are recognizing that, not only do we have a vibrant multi-state regulated cannabis industry, but interstate commerce is already happening on the unregulated industry and has for decades. So do you want to control it, or do you want to allow the interstate commerce to only be the purview of underground operators?
Yeah. And isn't it interstate commerce when there's an edible product in California that's also available in Massachusetts? It's the same recipe, the same genetics, the same manufacturing. It's all tested. And I mean, seems to me that is interstate commerce. The difference is they grew it and created it in one state to make it exactly the same as the other state. So it's like a license to recreate that recipe in a legal state. To me, that is interstate commerce.
Well, I mean, I think that you're onto something, but at the same time, intellectual property is not necessarily something that is held under the umbrella of interstate commerce. So, you can use the ideas and the methods and whatnot, but unless actual physical material is crossing state borders, it's not technically interstate commerce.
Right. And if it came from a seed, is that a little material, or is that still the gray area in this industry?
I mean, you'd have to talk to a lawyer about that.
Josh, what's your feeling about seeds and genetics? Because all three of us know there's a vibrant market for genetics on the internet.
Yeah, I would say grab as many as you can and store them in a dark, cool place, because if you try to find tobacco seeds, you won't find any anywhere on the planet. So eventually, whether it's 10 or 20 years, it's going to be really, really hard to find good genetics because, like I said, you can't find it in crops like tobacco anywhere.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And you start to see proliferation of certain strains, and then other genetic material starts to kind of go by the wayside or disappear. I mean, I'm a hobby grower, and I save every single piece of genetics that I possibly can, just because I don't know if it's going to be available in the future.
Wow. Do you have Blue Dream circa 2008? Because that was a pretty phenomenal sativa with its euphoric, energetic, uplifting experience that's been bastardized since with just genetic mutations or whatever. But if anybody's got some Blue Dream from 10 years ago, hit me up.
Me too. Right now, I'm rolling 2005 White Widow strain.
Nice.
And that was the
It's
first.
very weak, which is right where my wheelhouse is.
Blue Dream was the first strain that I bought legally when visiting California 6 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. And I do remember it, and I do enjoy that strain as well. Hey, Morgan, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, what's the latest on that CAO bill? Is it, excuse me, I know it's not going to go anywhere fast, but Cory Booker made a few little noise this week when he said, again, he's more concerned about the expungement issue than the safe banking issue. Is that a sign of a rift between the senators who wrote this bill?
Not really. Everybody knew that it was going to be pretty much like damn near impossible to get all the votes that you need in order to pass comprehensive cannabis policy reform that includes descheduling. But I think that CAOA, at least in terms of the banking language, does provide a blueprint for what the sponsors are looking for in terms of banking, at least, and also provides a ton of awesome language in terms of social justice and restorative justice. Right now, it's in recess, but there are conversations ongoing about exactly, what we would want added to safe banking, as well as what we would want attached to it, including both federal expungement measures, things like the HOPE Act, which would facilitate state expungement, which is, in my opinion, far more important just because of the numbers. And then, things like veterans access and potentially, firearm protections for medical patients. I think that it's going to be very difficult to get anything across the board in the current Congress that actually provides federal funds to cannabis businesses through things like SBA. But it's definitely something that we're pushing for. And right now we're in a position where we can push for as much as we can possibly get and then draw it back and, have some tokens to trade. But the conversations are happening, which a couple of months ago they weren't, and or at least not to the level that they are at now. And I have a lot of optimism that we're going to get something that involves banking, protections for social equity businesses, as well as restorative justice measures across the finish line this year. It's going to be difficult, but I think it can happen.
Wow, I love your optimism. It always makes me feel better after I talk with you, Morgan. I really do. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to it.
Well, we just got to let people know to contact their lawmakers so that their lawmakers know that this is something that they actually care about.
Yeah. And I'm actually seeing polls showing more and more states favorably um, basically supporting legalization or at least decriminalization of the plant. So the movement hasn't gone backwards at all. It's moving forward and it's gaining more and more momentum. And this particular ruling, again, I think will eventually put a little more pressure on our lawmakers to actually get off vacation and get back to work. You get it, right? I know you get it.
I mean, I'm enjoying the break a little bit, but
I get it. I know. I appreciate it. Look, and everybody deserves it. It's the summertime, and it's been one of the hottest summers on record. At least they do recognize that there actually is a concern about climate change now. That being said, it still was a 50-50 split with the vice president making that vote to get that climate change bill passed. And I'm very discouraged about our system right now, but I also know it's the best one in the world. I'll be patient and I'll make it. We'll get through it. In the meantime, we're way past 4:20. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to talking with you again next month, and bring that optimism with you. Will you please? I love that.
absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's always like, one step forward, one step back, one step forward, one step back. But things are heading in the right direction. It's victory is on the horizon. When it's going to happen, who knows? But we can't let up.
Right. Is that Cannabis Standard Time? I think that's what it is. All right. Hey, Morgan, thank you. We're going to take our break. We're going to come back. We're going to continue this discussion with some of our regulars on this show and some people that haven't been on for a while. So don't go away. Green Rush Live continues after this.
With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is The Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.
How do cannabis CEOs balance growth and optimization strategies? What is THCO, Delta 10, and CBNA, and why should you care about these minor cannabinoids? And why isn't the endocannabinoid system covered in medical school? Most people think they're up to date in trends in the cannabis industry, but they're about 6 weeks behind. Learn about what is truly next in the cannabis space by joining myself, Brian Fields, and Kellen Finney every week on the Dime Podcast, and of course, on PodConnects.